This is my first time sharing any experiences online that happened to myself or anyone else. So I'm sorry if I drag in places or if the formatting is bad. I will change names of any people involved, but the places and road names will be factual. I've never shared this with anyone other than my girlfriend before now, because although I have belief in paranormal events to a certain extent, aliens, ghosts, certain legendary creatures, etc., I'm not the type that just believes every story to be true or wants people to think I've lost my mind. It was early summer 2010. I only remember because my 21st birthday had just passed and I was finally legal to hit the bars. It was a Friday night, and I was up having a drink at a bar that my cousin David was the bartender at. It was a small town bar that outside of an event like a band or other entertainment was there, it usually stayed pretty quiet. It was very early in the evening, and I had just gotten out of work for the night, working at a McDonald's in another small town, less than 10 miles from the small town I lived in. I was only on my second drink of the evening when my phone rang. On the other line was a friend of mine from childhood, James. He was calling, asking if I wanted to come over to his brother's house and join them for a night of poker, beer, and weed. It sounded like a good time in my book, since I was literally only one sip into my second gin and tonic. I agreed to make the drive into Toledo. Most people know where Toledo is, but for those who don't, it's a city in northwest region of Ohio, about an hour or so south of Detroit. It was about a 20-minute drive from my small town, and I figured it would be a good time. I stopped at home to grab some cash. I only ever took $10 to $20 with me to the bar to make sure if I ever got caught up having a good time drinking, I didn't screw up and have too much of a good time and ended up closing down the bar that evening. I left my house at 11:05 p.m. I remember that distinctly because I called James to tell him I was on my way, as they were going to wait for me and start the poker game at 11:30. We always played a tournament style of poker game, where we all put our money in at once, got equal amount of chips, and played until there was only one person left with any chips left, who then got to keep all of the money. I took my usual route over to his brother Eddie's house, as I have done so many times before. We had all gotten together a group of anywhere from 4 to 6 of us, and would play poker in Eddie's basement, at least twice a month, but usually more. I had just gotten to the corner of Oakdale Street and East Broadway. I was sitting at a red light in the area that's nothing but residential housing outside of the elementary school that sat at that exact corner. I'm sitting up, looking at the red light, waiting for it to change, which always seemed to take absolutely forever coming from this direction, when I noticed something in the sky that, from my vantage point, was partially hidden behind the red light. It was a very bright white light that seemed to be pointing straight down, almost like it was a helicopter using a spotlight to identify something, but much, much brighter at the point of origin. I heard absolutely nothing after rolling my windows down, and knew this could not possibly be a helicopter, or I'd absolutely be able to hear it. Wanting a better view, I pulled into the parking lot of an ice cream shop that sat directly across the road from the school I was nearby, and got out of my car to try and figure out what the hell this thing was. When I got out of the car, I stared up into the sky and immediately found it again. It couldn't have been a plane because it didn't have the right shape. It was more oval than anything. Most stories you hear like this say it's circular, but it was definitely an oval shape. I almost thought perhaps it was a blimp given the shape, but it seemed far too long to be a blimp, even by the measurements of some everyone knows about, like the Goodyear blimp. Plus, it had no decals or identifying markers, either silver or grayish. After what felt to me to be about 30 seconds or so of looking at this thing, my eyes started to burn. Not burn in the sense of an extreme burning or anything like that, but almost like that feeling when a bug flies into your eyes and causes them to water up. I closed my eyes and began to rub them. My eyes are closed at this point, so obviously all I see is black. After finally getting my eyes to stop bothering me, I try to look up again and find it, only for it to be gone. I looked all around but could not see it anymore. This is a very densely populated neighborhood with houses, trees, etc. able to obscure any views of things you look up into the sky to see. After a little less than a minute, I decide, oh well, time to go play poker. I get over to Eddie's house, which is about 4 blocks from where this had taken place, and knock on the basement door. A few moments go by and no one answers. I decide to go to the front door and knock. Figured maybe since I'm probably 5 to 10 minutes early, maybe they were still upstairs playing on the PlayStation. I knock on the door, but still no answer. I finally start knocking very loudly on the door, almost pounding. Eddie finally answers the door and says, "Man, why the hell are you knocking on my door this late?" I look at him honestly confused and said, "Well, your brother said to come over and come play cards with you guys." He stares at me for what felt like an eternity and finally responds, "Yeah, I know he did. He called you like 5 or 6 hours ago, man. It's 4:30 in the morning. How late did you think we'd be playing?" This scared me quite a bit, as from what I had remembered, at this moment it could not possibly be any later than 11:25 or 11:30 at most. I attempted to play it off and say, "Damn, man, I must have lost track of time. Can I use your bathroom before I head back home?" He agrees and tells me I should splash some water on my face, as I look like I'm either drunk or haven't slept in a week. I walk into the bathroom, and my eyes are absolutely bloodshot, and it almost looks like I have 2 black eyes. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what happened to me that night. I have no explanation for the lost hours worth of time, how I could not have possibly noticed that much time being passed, or how on earth something that felt like my eyes being irritated by a mosquito or something similar flying into my eyes. I don't want to pretend to know what it was and explain it, or even assume that whatever it was I saw that evening had anything to do with it, but it has creeped me out ever since. This one has 3 parts to it. I've debated splitting them into separate posts, but I feel like they kind of build off each other. Granted, I have lots of strange experiences, which I'm sure I'll share eventually, but these 3 flow together. Let me start at the beginning. My parents were older when they met. My mom was born in 1960, and my dad in 1965. They met at a New Year's Eve party in 1990, eventually marrying in 1992. They had a rough couple years where my dad moved out, this has happened twice, leaving my mom convinced that she'd never have a family of her own. Eventually they worked it out and had my brother in late 1996. His birth wasn't smooth. He was born about 3 weeks late, and the doctors had to rush in and perform an emergency C-section on him as his heart rate spiked drastically. My mom said all these sirens went off and about 8 doctors rushed in. He was lucky to be alive, they said. And they said this again when he got extremely hurt as a 3-year-old. This was a period of several days where my parents were counseled about possibly losing him. Yes, he's fine now, but he's the kid who shouldn't be alive. And there was something watching over him. He's cheated death twice, and my mom has dreamed of angels holding him. Then there was me, in December of 1997. When my mom was about 30 weeks pregnant with me, she awoke one night to severe cramps and profuse bleeding. My dad rushed her to the hospital where the doctor told her, "Oh, this doesn't look good." And another said, "You will likely lose the baby." She clutched my brother, praying for a miracle. Due to her age, doctors worried for me throughout the pregnancy. The next morning, I was fine. The bleeding stopped and everything returned to normal. They had no answer as to what went wrong. They were confused as to how I was alive. It prompted jokes that some higher power was guarding not only my brother, but me as well. I do have permanent effects from that event. When I was 2, they discovered I had brain damage, which they linked to that day in 1997. Which all brings me to the first strange experience now that I've laid the foundation for you. When I was 5, I got really sick. I'd missed over a week of school. I was constantly tired, throwing up, and lethargic. My mom took me to several doctors who could find 0 issues with me, yet they knew I was sick. I didn't look well, I wasn't acting like myself. "Give it a few weeks, she will get better," my doctor told my mom. She took me home and was reading me a goodnight story one night. In an effort to cheer me up, she read me my favorite story. Typically, I would giggle and get excited at certain points in the story, but not this night. I was unresponsive and so weak that moving even my head made me feel awful. Mom finally gave up on reading to me. She looked at me and said, "You really don't feel well. Would you like me to pray for you?" I nodded. I was too young to understand religion, but I was aware enough to know it meant something to her. I appreciated her help, although I was neutral to prayer. I can't remember the exact prayer, but she said something along the lines of, "Please God, put your hand on her and heal her. She's felt sick for so long." After the prayer, she kissed me goodnight and left. I saw her enter her room and close the door behind her. I was alone, and not more than a minute later, I sat up. It was weird. Why did I sit up? It was as if someone controlled me. Also, I was so weak that the random energy to sit up got my attention. I looked around my room confused. I saw no one. As I was pondering this, I felt this hand touch my shoulder. A gentle little pat. It had pressure and felt warm. Also, I could feel the individual fingers. I felt the hand on my back for only a second, and then it was gone again. Yet, here's the crazy part. The second the hand touched me, I felt instantly healed. I had energy, an appetite, and didn't feel like puking. I was so excited I wanted to dance around my room. I was facing my bedroom door when I felt the hand which touched me from behind. The hand didn't scare me. I never once felt fear. I looked all around my room, but of course no one was there. I thought of my mom's prayer. Was it God? I felt sure that it was. Once again, someone was watching over me, protecting me. It stayed with me and I pondered it. I've never had anything like that happen since. Flash forward to 2 years later, I was in the 2nd grade. Every Friday, my granddad would pick my brother and I up from school. He would take us back to his house and we would spend the night. My brother and I would stay up late watching Cartoon Network, back when it was good, and order pizza. It was fantastic. Some of the best times of my childhood. One Friday stands out though. The Friday that my brother and I almost died. The afternoon started off normal. My granddad picked us up from school and we were headed to his house. My brother and I never wore seatbelts. We would just pretend to click them in. This Friday it slipped my granddad's mind to remind us to wear them, or maybe he figured a 7 and 8-year-old wouldn't need reminding. We were a mile from his home and pulled up to the 4-way intersection. It was a red light, so we weren't moving. My brother and I were playing some game and were getting kind of rowdy in our play. My granddad peered into his rear mirror and saw that we weren't wearing seatbelts. "Please, put your seatbelts on. You two know how dangerous it is not to wear them," he said. I kind of sighed and tried arguing with him. Never once in my 7 years had I had something bad happen, so why would now be any different? He held firm, and I put the seatbelt on, although it was stupid. We'd be at the house in a few minutes as we were about to enter his neighborhood. Not even 30 seconds after the seatbelt clicked into place, this giant white SUV plowed into us. It happened so fast that none of us saw it coming. Our car spun out into the intersection. We spun maybe 3 times before stopping. It made me dizzy. His engine was smoking, and the smoke was so heavy that we couldn't see out of the car windows. It was dark smoke. I couldn't even see my brother next to me. "Are you alright?" Granddad asked. We both answered, "Yes." "Hurry and exit the car. The engine's probably on fire. The car could burst into flames," Granddad said, so we scrambled out. I was in so much pain. The force of the car plowing into us caused me to fall forward. The impact was so intense that the seatbelt cracked 2 of my ribs when it caught me. Better than dead, right? For 2 months, my chest hurt. My granddad was covered in blood and required stitches. It was awful. He had to ride in the ambulance. I was so scared that I was uncontrollably crying. My brother and I had to ride home in a cop car. The police officer was extremely kind to me and sat with me on the side of the road, cuddling me and reassuring me that everything was fine. That I was fine. That granddad was fine. She bought brother and I ice cream for being brave and took us home. After the police were gone, and after grandmother hammered my granddad for not making sure we wore seatbelts, he sat us down for a serious talk. He told us that this voice had told him to check on us. The voice told him that something bad was about to happen and that we weren't wearing our seatbelts. He said it was so loud that he was shocked we didn't hear it. He said had the voice never talked to him, he would have never noticed we weren't wearing them. As the paramedics were treating him, one of the police officers tried to make a joke about it. He said something like, "Good thing the kids were wearing their seatbelts. Had they not, they would have died." It stayed with my granddad until he died. We would have died. The wreck was that severe, and we were small. Even at 7, I was pretty small for my age. I probably looked 5 or 6. His car was totaled. He said the voice was as clear as day. He believed our luck saved us again. Further proof that we had some supernatural power guarding us and protecting us. We shouldn't be alive right now, and I think about that a lot. That day in 2005. I would love to hear your thoughts on my 2 stories. What do you think? As a child, I was always watching scary things because I enjoyed the rush of it. However, it never crossed my mind that it could have been a bad idea. One night when I think I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, I was asleep and was facing the wall with my back to the door. The door, however, was open because light needed to be in the room, and again at this time I was afraid of the dark. I remember rolling over to look at the other side of the room. I looked at the door to see someone or something standing there. It looked masculine from how the frame was. It was completely black and taller than the door frame, but it wasn't standing directly in my room. It was outside of it, looking at me and drawing me in. There was no way it could have been a shadow. Shadows aren't completely black. As a child, I thought it was completely normal that it was there and then thought nothing of it, so I rolled back over and fell asleep. Now though, I would probably be scared and feel drawn into it. I still remember that I wish I would have talked to it or something of the sort. I have a very vivid memory of a supernatural encounter when I was young that I can't seem to find any information on. I live sort of out in the country, far enough to where you wouldn't normally see people casually walking around. The only company you get are various farm animals roaming the fields next to your house. When I was a kid, my mother was a smoker, and she would regularly go out to our backyard to have a cigarette. I needed her to open a jar of peanut butter for me because at this time, I'm 7 or 8 years old and couldn't do it myself. I go out back to ask her to open it for me, and I drop it on the ground and it shatters. She goes inside to get some paper towels to clean it up, leaving me on the back porch alone. While I'm waiting, I turn around and see, as best as I can describe it, a man that appeared to be made of metal. He had a round stomach and donned a green vest and a small top hat. His eyes were red, and to the left of him, his right, was a futuristic sports car. It wasn't a Lamborghini, but it had a very similar body type. It was silver, but not the same shade as the man. He was looking directly at me when I turned around, and he was waving at me. I was petrified. I turned around to try to go back into the house, but the door was locked. When my mother opened the door, I asked her why she had locked me out, but she said she didn't, and the man was gone. The thing that freaked me out the most about this, and what makes me believe he is a time traveler or some sort of supernatural being, is that our backyard was fenced in, and there was no way to get a car of that size in and out immediately after. I've never posted about this online, but when I tell people about it, they normally just laugh it off or claim I'm lying. It would be nice to know if anyone out there has had a similar experience with this futuristic man. This happened yesterday. I was at a friend's house, and there were 5 of us, including me. The friend has a pretty cool house, but it's very unsettling. Her room has a little room inside it. Like, it doesn't have a door, it's just a room for clothes and miscellaneous items. That room has a big mirror that is turned toward her bed. Her little sister used to talk about her friend Dina. It was pretty creepy, but I brushed it off usually because I don't believe in ghosts, imaginary friends, or things of that sort. So anyway, we were chilling in her room, talking, just celebrating, and suddenly most of us got the chills, and it absolutely destroyed our vibe. We got scared and crawled onto her bed, and just stayed there. It was around 4 o'clock in the morning. We laid there, spooked. I myself got some chills, but after some time, I calmed down and just laid on the floor and was watching YouTube. Then, the iMac standing in her room turned on once. The loud noise startled me and I crawled back into the bed with them. The iMac turned off, and in like 5 seconds it was turned on again, and then, once again, turned off. At this point, I was in complete shock. My adrenaline was so strong, it felt like I was choking myself. The house owner got a panic attack and started crying. Me and another guy decided to cover the mirror in the small room with a blanket, because it was very uncomfortable to look at it. While we were walking over there, like 5 meters from the bed, we instantly got cold and turned around. I had no control of my movement when I turned around. It felt like my brain told me not to go there. Well, anyway, we sat in the bed terrified. The girls were crying. I was stunned and didn't know how to react. At 8 o'clock, it started to get brighter and we felt much safer. It was a scary experience, and I kinda want to go back to do it again. I don't believe in ghosts, like 100%, but it definitely made me think when I got home and laid in bed. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And that, my lovely listeners, was a collection of 5 terrifying paranormal encounters. Paranormal encounters is pretty much where my channel started, so I always appreciate these stories for what they are, to be honest with you. It makes me strangely happy to read them, to be honest with you. Kind of takes me back to December, whenever things were brand new and fresh, I guess. That said, if you haven't noticed, we're past 500 subscribers now, so looking toward a bright future is just as preferable as looking toward a nostalgic past. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button. That is always appreciated. Trust me, as we've surpassed 500 somehow, I'm beyond ecstatic and appreciative of everybody who's subscribed. And finally, lastly, and the only other thing I want to say in this section, what was it? Oh yeah, leave me a comment. I confused myself with my long, pointless statement there. Leave me a comment if you feel so bold. I would love to hear from you. Down in the description, you'll find links for all these stories, as well as a link to a page where you can submit all of your stories to me if you would like me to read some of them for my channel. That kind of stuff really helps the channel keep going. And as we again move toward the future and move toward a growing channel, yeah, have your story on here early. Be one of the early stories. Be one of the ones before I hit 1,000, because that will happen. I promise you that. I promise you I will hit that number. All that said, friends, I just want to remind you that sometimes you need to step back and see the forest through the trees. Sometimes we just get too involved in things and all we can see is the trees in front of us. And then, like I said, we take a long step back and we can eventually make out the details of the forest. Sometimes the individual trees start to get us confused and leave us in a state of, not clinginess, but you know what I mean. Leave us in a state of attachment to the specific trees whenever we're not looking at the overall situation, the forest, so to speak. So, enjoy your forest. Keep the forest in sight. Love the trees individually, but enjoy the artistry that is the large woods in front of you. I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next video, but until then, my lovely listeners, sleep well.